back there about the time of the Alamo, really. Whenever you had 185 men standing up against 5,000, each man armed with best 2 shots, and then forced to reload, and then being attacked by overwhelming odds of men coming over the walls and getting overrun. Now then, some of you old timers may remember a scene in a Disney show that went like this. Firearms there. Of course, well, it just so happens that on February 25th, 1836, as those men were in the Alamo, before they died, but it was in the middle of the siege, a man took out a patent on a repeating revolver, and that man was Samuel Colt. And this is the revolver that he took the patent out on. Now, what a lot of people don't realize, though, is the revolver that he built first was not a handgun. It was a rifle, the Paterson rifle. Now, this rifle stood about yay tall off the ground. It was many times 8 shots. Now, the story starts way back before the Alamo, when a young man put out an advertisement in his hometown that come to the 4th of July celebration, this young teenager was going to blow a raft up in the middle of a pond. 4th of July came, many people came, all in their finest holiday clothes, ready to celebrate the 4th of July, and he did. He ignited an underwater mine. It was powder under a raft, and unfortunately the raft moved. And when it did, the explosion went off and covered the entire crowd with mud and water. Now, he didn't let that deter him, because the very next 4th of July, he was conducting his own experiment in his school, and he burnt the school down. And his dad said, well, that's enough. He's going to send him off somewhere where he can earn a living and not be such a danger to anybody around him. Where else would he put him but in the middle of an ocean? So he sent him off on a ship. And a lot of people believe that Sam Colt saw the wheel of the ship that they used to steer it, and thought, well, I can make a revolver. But that's not what he saw. What he saw was the locking mechanism, the mechanism used to accurately steer the ship per degree, per click. It would ratchet up and lock the wheel in place. There was already revolvers on the market and had been for 100 years, but they were not this style revolvers. They were all flintlocks. So what Samuel Colt came up with on that ship was not the revolver, but the mechanism to cock the hammer, index, and lock the cylinder. That was what the patent was for. And this patent was taken out in 1836, of February 25th of 1836. This rifle that he made was very finicky, very expensive to produce, very fragile. Now, I'm going to show you something. Now, this gun is a replica made by Pieta in Italy, and it has some issues. Sadly, it's one of the most expensive cap and ball revolvers you'll probably ever purchase, next to the Lamat. Right now, they're running at around $800 once all in to get it home. But it comes with some issues. One of them being, sometimes when you cock it slowly, it locks up fine. When you cock it quickly, it tends to over-rotate. Now, that may have been a problem with the original Patersons. I don't know. I haven't seen that in anything I've read, and I've read quite a bit on these guns. But that's a trouble I've had with this Pieta revolver. Another thing is, they come with this fancy loading tool. And it's an original style loading tool, but the very first ball we tried to seat with this broke the small screw in there, and this thing broke. So I don't know if the workmanship is that good on these Pietas. I've heard really good things about the Ubertis, but they don't even make those anymore. And even parts for this Pieta are hard to come by. So we're not going to shoot this gun very fast. But this was also, some of these things were problems with the original guns. They were known to be fragile. They were known to be very hard to fix in the field, especially for armorers who were used to smoothbore, Charleville style muskets. But one thing always stood out: this gun has 5 shots. Nothing else compares to it at the time. You do it gently and you'll be all right. Another thing that you'll notice is missing from this gun, there's no forcing cone in there. Now, you can't blame Sam Colt for not putting something that has never been invented yet into his gun. Matter of fact, he would invent the forcing cone on his next pistol. But what a forcing cone is basically a funnel that forces the bullet slightly larger than the diameter of the bullet, forces it to swage down the barrel. There is none in this. So if your cylinder does not lock up or you over rotate like that by accident with no forcing cone, could be a very dangerous thing. So you got to pay attention. All right, now many guns, many revolvers, if they're over rotating, you can just trim the hand and that will stop it. But this gun is not set up like that, and I'll show you that here in a minute. So anyway, back to our story. Young Sam Colt sees this ship's wheel turning, locking, steering the ship. He comes up with this idea: if I could lock the cylinder in place and make the cylinder turn by thumbing the hammer, I could make a revolver that would be practical. So what's he do? He's got a long ship voyage. He's just a young man. He carves out a working wooden model. Now that would be difficult for anybody to do with steel, let alone to make all the integral parts in this gun work with wood. That tells you something about Sam Colt. So anyway, he gets off the ship. He has this gun with him. He takes it to a gunsmith. He says, let's build this gun. He's just a young teenager. He says, and I'll pay you, build it. I think it'll work. The man builds it, and Sam Colt takes it out to fire it, and what happens? It blows up. Not to be deterred, he set out to devise another pistol, same action that he had to begin with, simply removing that, taking it to a reputable gunsmith and saying, and the man's name was Pearson, let's take this pistol, let's make it work no matter what it takes. Well, this all required money. And Samuel Colt's father had some money at one point, a fortune, but he'd lost it. And Sam had no money himself, so what did he do? He became a snake oil salesman, calling himself Dr. Sam Colt, C-U-L-T. He was 18 years old. He called himself Dr. Sam Colt of Calcutta. Now the reason he picked that, because that's where that ship had gone to that he'd been selling on. And so he knew a little bit of something about it. And what he did was he used laughing gas. And he would take and travel around the country and promise people that come up here, if you're hurting, I'll heal you. Give them a shot of laughing gas, and pretty soon they weren't feeling nothing but happy. And so he made quite a bit of money on this traveling show. And he would send as much of it as he could back to Pearson. But it wasn't enough to really create a pistol. I mean, Pearson had a lot of hard times. Just in one letter he requested that he send some money. The rent was overdue and there was no coal and it was below freezing. And he said, I got the pistol to work fine, but I'm about to freeze to death. So Sam Colt and him, they had some issues. Many years later, Pearson would even claim that this pistol was his design. I don't think that's true, because there were way too many people involved who would later on go on to say that yes, Samuel Colt designed this. And if Samuel Colt had simply hired a designer, I don't think he would have had if he was not a genius, he would have not come up with the 1851 Navy and several other guns like that, you know. So I'm pretty convinced that he designed this gun. So anyway, gets this gun out, finally gets a working version of this gun. All right, everybody in the world's gonna want this gun, right? First, reliable, usable, repeating revolver, 5 shots. No, nobody wants this gun. He can't sell it to his best friend. As a matter of fact, the government takes and tries it out and says, yeah, this is just way too expensive. It costs about 4 times the amount of a single shot smoothbore pistol. And at the time, the military was like, we don't really even need a pistol, because the pistols they were using, these smoothbore single shot pistols, basically about as handy in a battle as a rock. You get one shot, iffy, and then what do? You use it as a club. So the military doctrine was not centered on pistols at all. And he did have the carbine rifle, the rifle out that he had started to build, and that was the first thing he produced, but it was finicky. The government wasn't really into it. So what did he do? He went down to the swamps in Florida where they were fighting the Seminoles, and he took it directly to the soldiers. And he said, look guys, it's expensive, but if we can get your company to buy this, you'll be armed with 5 shots compared to the bow and arrow of the Indian or the single shot they might be using. And a lot of soldiers thought that was a good idea. As a matter of fact, there were a bunch of them actually sent down there to Florida, and he made a few sales. As a matter of fact, legend has it that 30 of these Paterson repeating carbines in a box were lost in the swamp, steel sealed. And that would be they wouldn't be usable today, but that would be a treasure if someone could find out where that box of those carbines went, because they're pretty rare. Anyway, nobody's really buying. Sam Colt's having a hard time. It's about this time that he begins to have real family issues. His sister, who was in love or had a crush on another man in town, had been jilted by this man. He was going to marry someone else, so she thought, I know how I'll spoil this party. She went and got a slight little bit of poison. She was going to drink it and pass out and be sick on the dance floor, and all anybody would remember of his wedding was her, and she would be the only thing anybody would be talking about. She went to the ladies' room, she took the little daub, and unfortunately she didn't measure it because she drank it and died instantly. And this was a hard time for Sam Colt. She was the talk of the town, but I don't think she was around to hear it, and it probably didn't work out the way she planned. Also about this time, Sam Colt's brother, as Sam Colt's business is floundering and he's not making any money and he's really working hard at this, his brother's writing a book called How to Keep a Second Set of Books. And this whole book he's writing is about how to swindle people. His brother's name's John Colt. Unfortunately, he doesn't pay his publisher, which the guy publishing a book on how to swindle people, you might think, maybe that's a little indication of what's to come. His publisher and him get into a fight. John Colt murders his publisher. And Sam and John are really close. As a matter of fact, there's some conspiracies even about a woman they might have both been in love with. But as it turns out, all this time that Sam Colt's business is going under, nobody's buying his pistols or his rifles. His brother's in jail for murder. His sister's dead. He goes to see his brother. Right before they hang him, there's a fire in the prison. And John Colt, Sam Colt's brother, when the smoke is cleared, is laying dead in his cot with a knife in his heart. Nobody knows how he got the knife. Nobody knows if Sam Colt did it. They know he was in the building right before it happened. Maybe he was just trying to save his brother the shame of being hung on the gallows. Anyway, this is a hard time for Sam Colt. He's got this pistol out. It's not doing really well. There's only one real buyer, and he don't think it'll ever amount to anything, and that's the New Republic of Texas. This New Republic of Texas orders a handful of carbines for their Navy. These carbines work well in the Navy situation because at any point in time, you're never more than a couple of paces away from an armorer's room where you could basically build any part you needed. They can be well maintained, and the Navy really, really likes them. And they buy a bunch of the carbines. They get a handful of the pistols. Years go by, and they kind of really disregard the pistols, and they really want the carbines. So Sam Houston takes the pistols out of service, and they wind up in the hands of a man known as John Coffee Hayes, Jack Hayes to a lot of people. Now, he is a wild dude. The Comanches and the Tonkawa Indians would charge up on a group of Texas Rangers and start firing bows and arrows. All the Texas Rangers had was mostly, not even rifles, mostly smoothbore, Revolutionary War style muskets and a pistol. So what this fight usually consisted of was the Indians showing up, the Rangers running as fast as they could on their horses for cover, dismounting and firing in a military fashion of one rank firing and then another rank firing. The only trouble was there's not really enough men in a Ranger unit to make that work effectively. You know, if you have 15 men and you split them in two, the Indians still have time to get down on you between shots. And that's what was happening. Fire, fire, pistol, pistol, And then by that time, it was hand-to-hand combat, just like medieval times. And the Indians could fire 5, 6, 7 arrows off horseback to the Rangers, one shot with a musket. This was a serious problem. They were getting beat everywhere. All over the state of Texas, the Rangers were having terrible trouble with Comanches. So Jack Hayes says, you know them pistols that we have from the Navy in reserve, I want 2 of those for each Ranger. Now what Jack Hayes was doing was he was going out and surveying for the state of Texas. And one day, not very long after him and his men had got these pistols, him and 13 other Rangers are surveying a place, and they're on top of a rock, and it's called Enchanted Rock. And this is a very special place to the Comanches and the Tonkawa Indians. They get on top of this rock, Jack Hayes and 13 other Rangers. The Indians don't like them being on Enchanted Rock. That's holy ground for them. They find themselves surrounded by an estimated 80 Comanche Indians. Now, this has always been an issue with me. Who does the counting in these fights? In the Battle of Adobe Walls, they claim that there's thousands of Indians, and they seem to always have accurate numbers, but I want to know, as the guys are shooting at the Indians coming in, who's over on the back peeking out the roof going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, figuring out how many Indians are there. We do know one thing, though. Jack Hayes and his 13 Rangers put their horses face to rump and made a circle like wagons shooting over the saddle. The Indians came in, they fired their muskets. The Indians back off, wait till they fire, and then they think, all right, we got them. Here they come down. And suddenly, each of these Rangers has 10 more shots. The Indians were not prepared for that. One Indian would later on say, I won't fight Jack Hayes anymore because he has a shot for every finger of his hand. I don't know if that's true or not. That's just the legend as it goes. Anyway, they thoroughly whooped to those Comanches, killing half of them. Comanches never seen anything like this before. Suddenly, this gun that nobody wanted, oh, it's relevant now. We've found a place, the American Western frontier, where we need more than one shot. Sam Colt had a lot of issues with family and finances around this time. And eventually his factory in Paterson, New Jersey, they call it the Old Gun Mill, was closed down. It ran from 1836 to 1842. He made roughly 5,000 guns in that time, and that includes carbines, pistols of various sizes and numbers. This pistol is called a number 5, also known as the Texas model, with a 9-inch barrel, but most of the number 1s were what they call baby Patersons in 28 caliber. This is in 36, 5-shot 36. And they made them all the way up. I believe they tried a 41 caliber. You might have to correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, but I believe there was a 41 caliber possibly. Anyway, Sam Colt basically just goes out of business. There's, and to everybody, as far as everybody knows nowadays, that's the end of Sam Colt and the pistol, right? He'll never come back. Well, don't worry. Next time he comes back, he'll come back with something a little bit different. You might say it was a big deal. You might say it was a horse pistol of a different color. You might say it walked right on out, head and shoulders above everything else that was out there. Oh, he'll be back. But in the meantime, let's talk about this Pieta-made Texas model Colt Paterson. Now then, as you'll notice, there's no loading lever on this gun. How do you load it? Most cap and ball guns have a loading lever comes down and forces the ball into the chamber. Well, as most of you who are watching this probably already know, you have to disassemble the barrel off of the gun. Okay, this is how you load the Paterson. Remove the barrel assembly by knocking out the wedge. Now, originally what would have happened, what would have been done, is you would put it on half cock. The cylinder would slide down onto this locking key. I don't know if you can see that in there. I'll rotate the cylinder around a few times. See that key right there? There's an interlocking spot in the cylinder for that key. To load the Paterson, you remove the barrel assembly by knocking out the wedge. You pull the barrel off. Originally, you would leave the cylinder on the gun, You would put it to half cock where it was mobile, and you would take this, what's left of it, you would insert it in there, you would set it up over a ball, like that, and if it was all in one piece, you would be able to work it up and down like this and drive the ball in. Unfortunately, the very first time we tried it with this Pieta replica, broke the loading lever. What we're going to do with this Pieta is we're going to take a 375 round ball. These are home cast. And I put the sprue up on top. We're going to take it and we're going to set it with this mallet. After you seat the balls with a hammer, you realize, like most cap and ball revolvers, have a spot cut right here, and that's to allow you to cap. This one has no such place. So what you have to do is cap the cylinder very carefully without putting your fingers in front of it off the gun. And if this was most situations, if I was on a firing range with a bunch of people around or something, I would only do 4. But seeing as I'm going to fire this just as soon as I get done, I'm going to load 5. There's no safety notches, so you can't carry it this way. They would have in the old days, that's how they carried it. But what you do now is you simply place the barrel with this captive wedge back on the gun, put the wedge back in, and should be ready to fire.
Hi, it's me, your normal host, and just want to mention it is October now, and this here pistol right here is now very popular in modern pop culture with the month of October, the holiday of Halloween. So we're gonna kill us a pumpkin. Let me make sure this thing locks correctly. That looks pretty right. Let's see what the damage was. So we see we have our entrance hole here. We have a little entrance hole in the front and a little exit hole out the back. But he's still having a pretty bad day. Let's try that again. Get all warmed up. Index the cylinder.
Set the cap.
Yeah, we just set that's the tactical way to set the cap nowadays, kids. No, it's October. We got to shoot more pumpkins. I'm going to knock the stem off this one. There we go. Cylinder is indexed. I pull a little to the right. This thing has a very interesting trigger. Oh, look at that, look at that. Done parted his hair.
So, final thoughts on this Pieta replica of the Colt Paterson. For the money, let's talk about the money. This is as far as I know, the second most expensive cap and ball revolver out there. You're going to be spending just shy of $800, maybe probably over $800 by the time you get it shipped. I mean, look at this. Some of the workmanship isn't the best, and I love Pietas. I have a number of them. My favorite cap and ball gun is probably the 1851 Pieta, because it's so robust and so well done. And the metal's nice and hard, and to me, the 1851 especially kind of outclasses the U-Birdie. But this Pieta, especially for the amount of money you're paying, it's really disappointing when you cock the hammer back and, you know, we're already chewing up the cylinder. It has some timing issues. It's more of a conversation piece probably. You know, But as far as the original Paterson goes, this is the gun that made basically all pistol development for the next 200 years possible. And we really, as far as firearms enthusiasts, we do owe a lot to this little firearm. That's all I got. Thanks for watching.